Good morning and welcome back to the Vision Alignment Show, where we all understand that we all have blindness in our lives. There are times where we have blinders on, and that's a good thing because we focus on our vision. And we focus on our vision because we know how important it is for our core beliefs, our core values, our core strengths. Some might just say core. Our core to be focused or to be aligned with our vision. That is so important today. I've got a good friend coming on today. He's been on our show once before, but I got to tell you, it's going to be dynamite to have him back. But before I do that, I want to tell you we have some good stuff coming for you at the end of the show in terms of the people that are coming on after this. So in the coming days, wow, amazing. Even well, just as amazing, not more amazing, but just as amazing as our friend Mr. John Molidor, who is going to be on today. And let's see if I can find John. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
Hey, Brian, how are you today? And
I'm wonderful, John. How are you?
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to get it right.
You got to come back
for the second time. Appreciate it. And maybe we have to go with the third. We'll see.
Hey, you know what? Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. But before we get, well, actually, why don't I ask you the one question? So, John, how do you think the pandemic has changed our brains, and if at all?
Clearly, it has, and so it's probably changed how we eat, how we exercise, and how we learn. And because of those three, and we'll just start with those three, it has really changed up then. How your brain is working, or in some cases not working at all. So we're going to try to explore that today with you.
Awesome. If you want to hear more, stay right there. Oh, perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for being on, John. If I have too much energy, tell me. Sometimes my wife says you need to have less coffee.
It's just revving up the system. It's quite all right. We get that. No worries whatsoever.
All right. Well, thank you. So 3 areas of our brain that's changed. What are those?
So let's talk about one of them is just eating. Some new recent studies coming out that maybe the classic eat 3 meals a day might not be so good during this time. And so we're probably finding people more and more maybe having little snacks, breaking up, if you will, the same amount of calories and spreading them out. Others are eating maybe for comfort. And so again, kind of the proverbial joke out there is COVID-19 pounds, people putting on weight because of probably some of the anxiety, possibly even the depression, and people feeling, I think, sometimes this sense of isolation. Eating is an easy way to sort of feed yourself, and not always in a good way, but in the positive way. People are sort of saying, all right, let's listen to my body, listen to my hunger level, and then see if I need to move forward. So I think that's changing. The other one is exercising, trying to get outside. Again, hard depending on your climate and where you are, since you're going global with this in terms of different hemispheres of the world. But like you and I chatted a little while ago, is here in the Midwest, spring is trying to break through, and so it's great to get outside just to walk. Again, perfect, great stuff for the brain. And then the third area was learning. It's going to be interesting to see how people are learning. People used to do it through reading, and we're worrying that maybe we're creating a generation of non-learners. Because if we can get on our laptop or if we can watch TV, it's kind of a passive process and probably not the best thing for our brain. So that could be a little bit scary in that regard.
Yeah. My wife and I was telling you earlier, we love to, after dinner and, we've gotten things settled down. We'd love to just sit in front of the TV. We watch Jeopardy because that's no standby. We watch whatever is on, and we may binge a show. Depends on how things are going. So,
and it's fascinating on the binging, because if you watch how producers of these series do things, they take you through, and then what do? They just hook you.
Right.
And then, of course, if you're binging or streaming it, down at the bottom corner, it's sort of like, next episode starts in 5 seconds. And so what do? You passively sit there, and since they've hooked you from the previous show, and your brain then goes, I wonder how they're going to get out of that situation, or I wonder what's going to happen next. And since your brain is always trying to predict what's going to happen next, what do most of us do? We just let the next episode go. And then all of a sudden it's, 1 o'clock in the morning. We're going,
right,
I got to go to sleep. I got to go to bed because I got to get up tomorrow. So it's, remember, I think we talked about the brain. It's an energy hog. It eats up about 20% of your energy every day. And so given a choice of doing something that's less taxing or more taxing, it's going to go to the less taxing. So sitting on the couch, watching TV, and being kind of the brain's going, yep, it works for me, but it may not work for us in terms of a motivation or learning perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think part of me, because I had some brain injury, part of me wants to rest and wants to just do that I call it vegetation, by on the couch and by the TV, just to allow my brain to relax. But that's probably not a good thing from your perspective.
Probably not. The one thing that, again, you and I have chatted, so for those listening in, Brian and I have sort of chatted over the past couple of weeks about different things. The one thing you do, which is great, is take a nap.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we know whenever you've learned anything, neuroplasticity, which is the changing of the neurons or the neural connections, it doesn't happen when you're actually learning something. It actually happens later on in sleep, or you can think of, you have two categories, sleep and non-sleep. And so in the non-sleep category, you have the taking a nap, meditating, going for a walk. That allows the brain then to process what you've just learned and then actually to keep it then in the brain. The watching TV, again, you have to balance it out. I mean, I do the same thing. I watch this stuff, I can binge on it. And sometimes you just need to have sort of a no mind, kind of mindless, just let it flow in, because maybe during the day it's been so intense, you need some type of balance. But the napping is probably one of the best things people can do. Or if that phrase or that word carries negative connotations, maybe some meditation, maybe the walking. It's kind of a mindless, and it really helps clear out the clutter in your brain. And then it allows the brain to go, okay, I'm going to start to consolidate what I just learned or what I've been focused on prior to this moment.
So would you say doing that walking without headphones?
Yeah. So here's the thing now. And again, here's the paradox. We hope that if you're out there walking and you're listening to this podcast, that's good. But on the other hand, you might be doubling up on just allowing your brain to just be outside. And what happens is when you're outside or when you're biking or walking or running, is your visual focus actually expands a little bit. And since it's expanded, stuff can just sort of come by. And so It's letting the brain settle.
Hmm.
And this then is different than, let's say, when we're on our laptop or looking at our monitor, or, I mean, the big one is our phones, is that you take sort of this broad view. Let's think of it as landscape. So if we think of things as the landscape, then that's just sort of allowing the non-focus. But then you take something like, your phone, and so what happens here is then your visual focus has to come in.
Right.
And when you do that, then you're sort of signaling to the brain, I need to attend to this. And that's probably why phones are so addictive, and their smartphones are so addictive, is because it's causing the brain to have to focus down. And then you get fatigued.
Sure.
So if you're on Zoom calls a lot, or if you're on your phone a lot, it's easy to get fatigued. And that's the other thing that in some ways this pandemic has caused, is this fatigue, which then can lead possibly to anxiety or even depression, is because this narrow focus. And so one of the best things you can do, like if you're watching the podcast, or if you're on a Zoom call, or if you've been on your phone a lot, is get up, go to the window, or preferably go outside, and then allow your visual to expand. And now you're looking at the horizon. You're looking at landscape view. And then you just do that, and it just, again, kind of clears the brain. And then you come back to the sharper visual acuity, sharper focus. And we know, and this is a crazy thing, we know that mental focus follows visual focus. So if I have a task that I need to do or want to do, the more I can bring my visual focus together, then my mental focus will follow. And then I'm not being distracted by different things, or, I should be looking over here, should be doing this. And so, but then that's also time bound. It's probably in what's called
how do you mean that?
Yeah, so most people have heard the circadian cycle, the 24-hour cycle. Yeah. Well, we also have what are called ultradian cycles, which are about roughly 90 minutes. And you have it all day, even during sleep. And so what you want to try to do, if you want to maximize learning, is try to do it in this 90-minute period of time. So first you want to, obviously we would say you want to have some awareness, like, oh, I want to change my eating habits, or, oh, my learning habits, or I want to learn something. And so that brings awareness. And then you want to have a little friction, like, oh, you got to get sort of fired up. And that's going to be, your motivation. But then you need attention. And that's where this focus comes in. And so the visual focus becomes important. So one of the recommendations, so I do more and more of my work now on my laptop, is so if I want to bring this focus and not be distracted by stuff over here, stuff over there, I will then focus on one piece of my laptop on the screen and focus on that for about 60 to 120 seconds. So a minute to 2 minutes, focused in. And then all of a sudden, boom, I can start in on the focus. Or another trick that people talk about is if you want to do a task. So let's say you and I want to design a program, and I keep kind of delaying it. So when I get the thought, oh, I need to work on this for Brian, go do something within the next 10 to 30 seconds. If you go and you just do one thing, which could be as simple as, I need to open up my email and find the email from Brian, there's then a higher probability that I'll actually start on the task and then stay on it. And typically, most of us, we look at our task lists and kind of go, okay, I need to work on this project with Brian. And then I kind of look down the task list, and it's like, call and see if the grocery store has this item. You default down to let's go do that simple one. I can call them, versus, getting the stuff, that's going to take a lot of energy. And remember, given the choice between expending energy or conserving energy, the brain wants to conserve it. And that's why you kind of have to go through these steps to get this focus moving.
You're a wealth of knowledge. How do you get to know so much about the brain?
Talking to people like you.
Finding out what makes them tick.
Yeah, so I think part of it is, and we talked the last time about kind of our origin. So I grew up as one of 10 kids, and so it's literally like every night sitting around the dining room table, I could see all these different ways, and I'm like, we come from the same family, it's the same gene pool, it's the same, environment for the most part, and yet quite a bit of difference. And so I've always been intrigued by how people think and behave in ways that they do. And, as I went through school and stuff, there'd be a lot of theories about it, like even as simple as your sibling order or your environment, and it just didn't seem to explain all of it. And so finally kind of came around to what makes all of us unique is our brains. And so I just started reading and talking to people and reading and studying and reading and more reading. And so I would say within the last 10 years, the whole field of neuroscience is caught up with a lot of maybe being able to explain behavior. So I'll give you a simple one. You have to make a decision on something. And you weigh this and you do all this stuff, right? And when somebody started to ask you, well, why did you do that? And a lot of people go, well, I just had a gut feeling. I had a good feeling about it. Well, we now know there's neurons actually in your gut. And
Oh,
so,
really?
yeah, they don't quite function as the same. They communicate. So let's put it that way. So we now know that if you want to change behavior, you have to change your nervous system. And your nervous system, again, we don't think in these terms, but it's your brain, it's your spinal cord,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's the connection of your brain and spinal cords to all your organs, and then it's the connections back from all your organs to your brain and spinal cord. So it's this continuous loop. Again, things we are taught, the mind-body distinction, probably a horrible, horrible concept in my opinion, because you can't separate the two. They're all linked, and it's in this continuous loop. And so why do people behave the way they do? Why do they think the way they do? And that's, to me, so fascinating, because you have input coming from the outside through your senses.
Mm-hmm.
You have input from your inside coming up to your brain, so all your senses and what's going on inside. And then you have your memories. And so the brain is always trying to predict what's about to happen. So it takes the outside input, the inside input, matches it to memories, and then makes a prediction about what's to happen. And so if you want to change your behavior, one of the best things you can literally do is change what you're doing now, because those become then the memories that eventually tomorrow or the next day is being compared to. Now, if you have a steady diet of, oh, Brian, you're this, or Brian, you're that, or Brian, it's going to take some time to undo some of that.
From a negative perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it's doable, and that's what's so cool. And that's what we talk about, the neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change these connections. And so it's fascinating, but it takes, remember, it's going to take some energy, and given the choice, the brain typically will opt not to change it. So that's why you want to keep the motivation high to try to make some change.
So that's why the vision that I showed you earlier before we came on is so important in order for us to be able to understand the future, to be in our future, to experience our future as we perceive it happening, is so important, right?
Absolutely. And then here's the thing that becomes critical from my perspective of a vision statement or having goals or visions, is you have to do something, though.
Yeah.
So just thinking about it is not going to change.
It's a good step.
So that's it's sort of like what we would talk about is that you want to become aware.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. That's the first one. Is again, people talk about this being kind of a gated process. You have to go through these different gates or stages. So one, you need to be aware. So if you want to change something about yourself, you have to be aware. Because if you're not aware, there's going to be no change.
Right.
Then what you want to do is to create some type of what I'm going to call alertness. That's sort of this friction, like, oh crap, I gotta do something now. And that's going to be kind of the motivation. And again, beauty for the brain doesn't care if it's love-based or shame-based. So it's like, you could say, I want to do this because I love my family. I want to be there for my family and my friends. It could be shame-based. It's like, if you don't do this, you'll be a failure or whatever. Brain doesn't care. But you have to create. So we would say do a whole bunch of reasons why.
Yeah.
Keep the motivation going. And then you need that attention. And that becomes critical. And that's where your focus is. So if you have listed these steps out or the vision out, then you need to make sure you're doing it and do it in incremental steps, small successive incremental steps. It's going to be the best way to do this.
Okay. There's also probably a lot of speakers on this podcast listening in. What would you tell them? Because I think there's a lot of speakers out there who just want to speak. They want to share their story with people, but they don't want to necessarily go through the steps to to have that awareness, to go to a point where being more alert and have that alertness, and then having the attention. So what would you tell them? It's just going to take them longer, right? To get there. They'll probably still get there.
No, they may or may not. That's the problem. So what's the goal? Sort of like if you don't have a goal in mind, you'll get there.
Yeah.
But you don't know where it is.
Yeah.
Versus, so we would say that if you want to learn something, you have to go through those steps. And if you want to unlearn something, so if you have a traumatic experience, you actually can unlearn. Actually, you can't get rid of the memory. You'll always have the memory, but you can reduce what we would call the emotional load or some of the emotional attachment. You can lessen that. And as you lessen that, then for a lot of people, then they can continue to function. So we would say, for example, the brain is quite plastic up to about age 25. Then after age 25, it's less plastic. So what we mean by that is before age 25 and younger, it's pretty easy to learn stuff. But the problem is you don't have that many experiences in life, but it's easy to learn. It's almost passive. I mean, kids can learn all kinds of stuff. I mean, look how we learned how to walk for the most part. Pretty easy. Language is much easier when you're younger. When you get older, the flip side, less plastic, but you got more experiences. So it seems kind of a paradox. So I would say prior to age 25, you're not always responsible for what's been told to you, what you've learned, what you've been taught, because remember, it's pretty passive. But after age 25, you have to be responsible for it. Now you can decide that you want to change or not. And if you don't, then you're going to just be a recipient of all those messages and stuff that was input. If you do want to change, it's going to take some energy. But it's doable, and you can change up those connections.
Kind of similar to the way they always say, energy is wasted on the youth.
Yeah, in many ways it is, because it's like fewer experiences, but easy to learn. Then as an adult, you go, oh, I'd like to learn another language. It takes a lot of energy because the connections, you've already cemented connections, and now you have to then create new connections for this learning. And then you have to go through that gated thing where you talk about the awareness, the alertness, the attention, and then you have to have a reward system. So we would also say reward yourself in little steps, not at the final step of your vision, but little steps. It's like, so if you want to be healthier and you're going to eat better, then, maybe you have, again, we know the more plant-based you can be in your diet, the better. So maybe you have, so we have meatless meals now. We say, okay, every Tuesday and Thursday, meatless meals. All right. Then maybe it gets a little bit, maybe it's 3 or 4 days out of the week, but it's like, so we're rewarding ourselves by saying, all right, did you have a meatless too? Yep. How about meatless? Yep. Again, rewarding. Exercising. So if the goal is to be doing something a certain distance or time, then you want to reward yourself incrementally as you move along. That's all that's doing is, again, to get a little technical, is then the dopamine system comes into play, and then the dopamine system then sort of modulates the epinephrine. And so rather than wanting to quit, the reward system then says, okay, because after a certain while, you want to quit. And so the dopamine system says, no, you want to keep going.
Fascinating. I love it. I'm just so interested in the brain, and you have such knowledge. It's been incredible. So
I love reading about it. And I think for me, the biggest challenge for me has been, how do you translate some of this stuff? Like both of us being in the speaking industry, how do we translate it to speakers? And so, I mean, the one piece of advice I'd give speakers, anybody listening in, is if you want to become a better speaker, go learn something, anything, because the process that goes into learning then can translate over to your own speaking. You also then, as you learn stuff, it overlays networks to existing networks. Maybe it triggers a new way of thinking about it. So, as you learn about, vision or radical vision, then that translates then to maybe motivation. And so they all start to interrelate and connect, and then it probably will make you a stronger speaker by learning something new. So I'm always trying to learn something new.
And don't get hung up on what you're learning about. So if you wanted to learn about maybe pick something off topic, like engine building. Just the fact that you're learning how to build an engine doesn't mean you're going to talk about building engines in the future. You're gonna use that learning process, right?
The learning process, as well as possibly what you learn, because then if you learn about then building an engine, is that one is dependent, that basically the gas ignition, ratio has to be and then you then translate that. Well, what's the correct ratio of facts to exercise? And maybe it's like, oh, well, I had to pay attention to this ratio. Oh, maybe I have to do the same thing in my speaking. So that's where maybe something you learned, you modify it or translate it then to your actual speaking process.
Or you like as so many speakers do, you have a metaphor.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Or a story. Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. Wow. This is great. Thank you so much, John. I can't believe we're already at the end of our time again. Was there something you wanted to cover that we haven't covered yet?
Well, basically, I just to be thinking about this sheltering and this pandemic has done things to our brain. But then remember, we can do things also to our brain. We can change our brain. Requires all those steps. And I would just keep encouraging people to remember they're not passive in this process. They can be very active in the process. And to do that, wherever they can. I think it'll be stronger for their mental health, physical health, and well-being.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So if you will hang around in the green room for a little bit afterward, that'd be great. I will close the show out, but thank you.
You're
all right.
welcome.
Take care, John.
Thanks.
All right, bye. Wow. Oh, what a great show from John Molidor. What a good friend and a great expert on the brain. So I love hearing about that. So what I'd like for you to do is to think about the brain and how you're taking care of your brain and what you can do to really improve your brain health. That's probably one of the most important things you can take from this podcast today. Having said that, we've got other good stuff coming up for you in the future. So tomorrow I'll be speaking specifically about blind spots, and we'll talk more about vision. So that'll be from me. And then on Thursday, we have Crystal Washington to come on and talk about the technology and the technology of the future. So a lot of good stuff is going to come from Crystal, and I'm just so looking forward to having her on. And then Friday, we have a few special guests. I'm not going to tell you who they are yet, but I'll tell you tomorrow. I appreciate you all. I appreciate you being here. And as always, keep one eye on the road. Bye.